The frozen moon called Helion 7 was dying. Taewon Park pressed his back against the ice wall and checked his rifle's energy level. 20%, maybe enough for 5 more shots. Around him, the sounds of battle filled the thin air. Explosions, screams, the horrible grinding noise the Ravagers made when they moved. He had been fighting for 6 days, 6 days without real sleep, 6 days watching friends die, 6 days holding a line that kept breaking. Taewon was 28 years old. Before joining the Coalition Defense Force, he worked as a police officer in Seoul. That felt like a lifetime ago. Back on Earth, the worst thing he faced was criminals with guns. Here he faced machines that wanted to tear apart every living thing they found. His helmet radio crackled. Lieutenant Kravor's voice came through, rough and angry. Kravor was a Draxian, one of the reptile-like aliens who valued honor above everything else. Usually, Kravor liked to fight. Not today. All units fall back to extraction point. This is not a suggestion. Fleet Commander has ordered full retreat. Taewon felt something cold settle in his stomach. Retreat. They were abandoning Helion 7. He understood why. The Ravagers outnumbered them 10-1. Staying meant dying. Every tactical computer in the Coalition fleet was probably showing the same numbers. Stay and die. Retreat and survive. Around him, soldiers started pulling back. Humans, Draxians, Velkari insect soldiers, all moving toward the landing zones where transport ships waited. The line was collapsing. In minutes, the Ravagers would swarm through and reach the colony below. Taewon glanced at his tactical display. The small screen on his wrist showed friendly forces in blue, enemies in red. There was a lot of red, too much red, but something else caught his eye. A yellow marker. Civilian transport grounded, not moving. He zoomed in. The transport was 2 kilometers away behind enemy lines. Its engines were damaged. People were still boarding. He could see the life signs. 200 civilians, maybe more. His heart started beating faster. At their current retreat speed, that transport would be overrun in 4 minutes. Everyone on board would die. The Ravagers didn't take prisoners. They just killed and recycled everything into more Ravagers. Taewon switched his radio to the command channel. Lieutenant Kravor, this is Corporal Park. There's a civilian transport still loading. Grid reference 774. They need cover, static. Then Kravor's voice, harder than before. Corporal, retreat order is absolute. That transport is behind enemy lines. They are lost. Sir, I can reach them. 4 minutes if I move fast. No, fall back. That is an order. Taewon looked at the yellow marker on his display. Then he looked at his retreating squad mates. Hyejin Choi, the medic, was helping a wounded Velkari soldier hobble toward safety. Captain Kwan was coordinating the withdrawal, his face tight with stress. Everyone was following orders. Everyone was being smart. Everyone was leaving those people to die. Taewon thought about his younger brother. Min-soo had died 3 years ago in a pirate attack on a colony transport. The Defense Force had calculated that saving the transport wasn't worth the risk. They retreated. Min-soo died screaming for help that never came. Taewon reached up and switched off his helmet radio. The voices in his ear went silent. He checked his rifle one more time. 20% charge. 5 shots, maybe 6 if he was lucky. He stepped forward, away from the retreat, toward the Ravagers, toward the transport. The frozen ground crunched under his boots. His breath came out in white clouds. The Ravagers were everywhere ahead of him. Dark shapes moving through the ice fields. They looked like a nightmare mixture of metal and flesh, built from the remains of their victims. Some walked on 2 legs, some on 4, some crawled. All of them had weapons. Taewon ran. He kept low, using the ice formations for cover. A Ravager spotted him and turned. He fired. The plasma bolt hit its head and the machine went down. 4 shots left. Behind him he heard shouting. Someone had noticed. Probably Hyejin. She was always watching out for the squad. But he couldn't stop now. If he stopped, he would think about how stupid this was. How impossible. How he was definitely going to die. He didn't let himself think. He just moved. More Ravagers came at him. He dodged behind a boulder and threw a grenade. The explosion bought him 10 seconds. He sprinted through the gap. The transport was closer now. He could see it clearly. People were climbing aboard, moving too slowly. They didn't know the Ravagers were coming. They didn't know they had less than 3 minutes. A plasma blast hit the ice near his feet. Taewon rolled and came up firing. 3 shots left. A group of Ravagers was moving toward the transport. He couldn't let them get there first. He changed direction and ran straight at them. They turned toward him, confused. Coalition soldiers were supposed to be retreating. Why was this one attacking? Taewon fired his last 3 shots. 2 Ravagers fell. The third charged him. He dropped his rifle and pulled out his combat knife. The Ravager swung a blade arm at his head. He ducked and drove the knife into what looked like a power cell. The machine sparked and died. His rifle was empty. His knife was stuck in the dead Ravager. He had no weapons left, and there were more machines coming. Taewon grabbed the dead Ravager's blade arm and tore it free. It was heavy and sharp and still sparking with energy. Good enough. He kept moving toward the transport. The Ravagers were swarming now. They were everywhere. But something strange was happening. More and more of them were turning toward him. They were ignoring the retreating coalition forces. They were focusing on the single human running toward them. Back at the extraction point, Lieutenant Cravor watched his tactical display. One blue marker was moving in the wrong direction. Moving fast. Moving alone. It was Taewon Cravor's scales bristled. This was madness. The human had disobeyed orders. He was throwing his life away. It was stupid. It was illogical. Cravor saw something else on the display. The Ravagers were redirecting. They were pulling forces away from the coalition retreat. They were all moving toward the single human, and that created a gap in their line. A weakness, something hot surged through Cravor's chest. His people called it battle recognition. The moment when you saw true warrior spirit. The moment when honor demanded action. Cravor roared. The sound carried across the ice. Every Draxian within hearing distance turned. They knew that roar. They knew what it meant. Cravor charged back toward the battle. 5 Draxian soldiers followed without hesitation. Then 10, then 20. Commander Daeun Song was coordinating the human evacuation when she saw it on her command display. Cravor and his Draxians were turning around. They were going back. And they were heading toward where Taewon had gone. Her tactical training said this was wrong. The retreat order was correct. Staying meant unnecessary casualties. Every number supported withdrawal. But she was human. And Taewon was her soldier. Her responsibility. Daeun switched to the human command frequency. All human units, this is Commander Song. New orders. We're going back. We're covering that transport. Captain Kwan's voice came back immediately. Commander, the retreat order. I know what the order was, Captain. I'm countermanding it, for the human units only. Anyone who wants to stay with the main retreat can do so. No judgment. But I'm going back. Silence on the radio for 3 seconds. Then Kwan spoke again. 1st platoon is with you, Commander. 2nd platoon moving to support. 3rd platoon ready. More voices. More units. Within 90 seconds, 2/3 of the human force had turned around. They were running back into the battle, running toward certain death. Running because one man had decided that some things mattered more than survival. Taewon reached the transport. The civilians were screaming, pointing at the approaching Ravagers. He waved them toward the ship. Get aboard. Move now! A child was crying, frozen in fear. Taewon grabbed the girl and pushed her toward her mother. Go, I'll hold them. The Ravagers were 30 meters away, then 20, then 10. Taewon raised the blade arm he'd taken. His hands were shaking. He was terrified. But he didn't move. He stood between the machines and the transport. The first Ravager reached him. He swung, the blade cut through metal. The machine fell. Another came. He kicked it back and swung again. Then plasma fire lit up the sky, not from the Ravagers. From behind them, Taewon looked up and saw the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Coalition soldiers. Hundreds of them. Charging through the Ravager lines. Cravor was leading them, roaring challenges. Hyejin was there too, firing her rifle as she ran. Captain Kwan, Commander Song, everyone, they had come back. They had all come back. The battle became chaos. Coalition forces crashed into the Ravagers like a wave. The machines, programmed for logical warfare, couldn't adapt to the emotional fury of soldiers fighting to protect one of their own. Behind Taewon, the transport's engines roared to life. The damaged ship lifted slowly, unsteadily, but it lifted. The civilians were safe. Taewon fell to his knees. He was exhausted. His arms hurt. His legs wouldn't work anymore. But he was smiling. Cravor reached him first. The Draxian grabbed Taewon's arm and pulled him to his feet. You are either the bravest warrior I have ever seen or the biggest fool. Perhaps both, Tae-wan laughed. It came out as more of a wheeze. Probably both, sir. Above them in orbit, Fleet Commander Thelvan watched the tactical display with her multiple compound eyes. Her logical Velkari mind tried to process what had happened. The retreat should have worked. The numbers were perfect, but one human had disobeyed. And somehow, impossibly, that had turned defeat into victory. The Ravagers were retreating now. The coalition held Hylian 7. Every civilian had escaped. Thelvan's mandibles clicked in confusion. What have the humans done? She whispered, but she knew the answer already. The humans had ignored logic. They had chosen emotion over calculation. They had refused to retreat, and somehow that had changed everything. 3 days after the battle, Tae-wan woke up in a medical bay. His body hurt everywhere. The doctors had fixed his broken ribs and burns, but healing always hurt worse than the injury. At least that's what the medics told him. Hyejin was sitting in a chair next to his bed. She looked tired. Her medical uniform had bloodstains on it. She smiled when she saw his eyes open. "Welcome back, hero," she said. Her voice sounded strange, like she was angry and sad at the same time. "Hero?" Tae-wan tried to sit up. Pain shot through his chest. "I just did what needed doing." What needed doing got 2,000 soldiers killed, Tae-wan. Hyejin's hands were shaking. "We won. We saved the civilians. But the cost?" Tae-wan felt something cold in his stomach. 2,000. He knew war had casualties. He'd seen people die before. But 2,000. Because of him. Because he charged forward when he should have retreated. "The tribunal starts tomorrow," Hyejin said quietly. "Fleet Commander Thelvan is charging you with insubordination. Commander Song and Captain Kwan, too, for supporting you. Even Lieutenant Kravor. A trial. A court-martial. They're saying you broke the chain of command, that you made an emotional decision that endangered everyone." Hyejin looked at him. "Did you think about the consequences? Before you ran?" Tae-wan remembered the moment, seeing the transport on his display, thinking about his brother, making the choice. "No, I didn't think. I just moved. That's what they're going to use against you." The next day, they brought Tae-wan to the tribunal chamber aboard the Coalition command ship. The room was huge and cold. It reminded him of a courtroom back on Earth, but stranger. Alien. Representatives from different species sat in a semicircle, watching him. Fleet Commander Thelvan stood at the center. She was a Velkari, an insect species with compound eyes and multiple arms. Her voice came through a translator device, emotionless and precise. "Corporal Tae-wan Park, you are charged with willful disobedience of direct orders during combat operations. How do you answer?" Tae-wan stood as straight as his injured body would allow. "Guilty, Commander." Whispers filled the chamber. Thelvan's mandibles clicked. "You admit your crime?" "I disobeyed orders, yes. But I don't consider it a crime." More whispers. Thelvan raised one of her arms for silence. "Explain." "There were civilians who needed help. I could reach them. No one else would. So I did." Tae-wan kept his voice steady. "That's not a crime. That's what soldiers are supposed to do." Thelvan's compound eyes seemed to study him. "Soldiers are supposed to follow orders. Without discipline, there is chaos. Your action, while coincidentally successful, violated the foundation of military structure." She activated a holographic display. Battle simulations appeared, floating in the air. "I have run 100 scenarios of your charge. In 89 of them, you die without affecting the battle's outcome. The civilians still die. The coalition retreats. We lose nothing more than one soldier. The simulations played out. In most of them, Tae-wan's blue marker disappeared under red enemy forces. The transport was destroyed. Everything ended the same way. In the remaining 11 scenarios, Thelvan continued, you reach the transport but die before it can escape. The outcome is the same. Your action was irrational risk based on emotional instability. Tae-wan felt his jaw tighten. Emotional instability? I saw people who needed help. You saw an impossible situation and chose sentiment over logic. This is the human weakness we must address. Your species makes decisions based on feelings, not facts. A voice spoke from the tribunal seats. Lieutenant Kravor stood. Commander Thelvan, I request permission to speak. Thelvan's mandibles clicked in what might have been annoyance. Granted. Kravor walked to the center of the chamber. The Draxian's scales gleamed under the lights. I charged after the human. I disobeyed the retreat order as well. By your logic, I am equally guilty. You are, Thelvan said simply. Then prosecute me too. But first let me tell you why I followed him. Kravor looked at Taiwan. Among my people, we have a concept called battle recognition. It is the moment when you witness true warrior spirit. The moment when someone shows they value honor over survival. He turned back to Thelvan. When I saw the human charge alone toward certain death to protect others, I recognized that spirit. My choice was not emotional. It was recognition of the highest warrior virtue. And I would make it again. Other Draxians in the chamber roared approval. Thelvan's mandibles clicked rapidly. This tribunal is about military discipline, not philosophical concepts of honor. Another voice spoke. Ambassador Jilin Illumini floated forward. The energy being glowed softly in the dim chamber. Her voice was gentle but clear. Commander Thelvan, with respect, I believe you are missing something important. May I present alternative analysis? Thelvan gestured agreement. Jilin created her own holographic display. These are psychological profiles of the Ravager machine intelligence. They operate on pure strategic calculation. They predict enemy behavior based on logical patterns. The display showed battle data. When Corporal Park charged, he created an unpredictable variable. The Ravager's programming could not account for a single soldier attacking when logic demanded retreat. They redirected resources to eliminate what they perceived as a tactical error. This created the gap that allowed the counteroffensive to succeed. Jilin looked at Thelvan. Your simulations are correct in showing that his action was mathematically unlikely to succeed. But that is precisely why it worked. The Ravagers cannot predict illogical behavior. Emotion became a tactical advantage. Commander Da Un-song stood next. Ambassador Jilin is correct. I've analyzed the battle data. When the Ravagers focused on Taiwan, their formation became vulnerable. When Lieutenant Kravor charged, it created a cascade effect. Other soldiers followed. Not because it was logical, but because they were inspired. She walked toward the center. Yes, we lost soldiers. War has costs, but we saved every civilian. We held Helion 7. And we discovered that human unpredictability is a weapon the Ravagers cannot counter. Thelvan's multiple eyes focused on Song. You argue that emotional decision-making should be encouraged? I argue that sometimes the irrational choice is the most rational strategy against machine enemies. The tribunal chamber erupted in debate. Some species supported strict punishment. Others argued for recognition of the victory. The Velkari demanded discipline. The Draxians demanded honor. The Lumine suggested compromise. Thelvan called for silence. This tribunal is deadlocked. The charges are serious. The victory is undeniable. The precedent this sets will affect coalition military doctrine for generations. She looked at Taiwan. Corporal Park. Before we decide your fate, I will ask you one question. If you face the same situation again, knowing the casualties that resulted from your action, would you still disobey the retreat order? The chamber went silent. Everyone watched Taiwan. He thought about the 2,000 soldiers who died. He thought about the civilians who lived. He thought about his brother. Yes, Commander, he said quietly. I would make the same choice again. Even knowing the cost? Especially knowing the cost. Your retreat order guaranteed those civilians would die. You chose mathematics over lives. I chose lives over mathematics. That's the difference between us, Commander. You calculate acceptable losses. Humans don't accept that any loss is acceptable. Thelvan was silent for a long moment. Her mandibles clicked softly. Finally, she spoke. The tribunal will recess to consider its verdict. However, I will offer a preliminary proposal. She turned to address the entire chamber. It is clear that human tactical behavior is fundamentally different from established coalition doctrine. It is also clear that this difference achieved results our standard tactics could not. Therefore, I propose a compromise. Corporal Park and all humans involved in the Helion 7 incident will not face court-martial. Instead, they will be transferred to a new experimental unit. This unit will study and develop tactics based on human emotional decision-making. If such tactics prove effective, they may be integrated into coalition military doctrine. If they fail, it will demonstrate the necessity of strict discipline. Ambassador Jilin glowed brighter. A wise compromise, Commander. Kravor nodded. I volunteer to join this unit. Other voices joined, Draxians, young Velkari. Even a few members of other species. They wanted to learn this new way of fighting. Taewon felt dizzy. They weren't punishing him. They were promoting him, making his disobedience into something official. He didn't know if that was better or worse. As the tribunal ended, Taewon walked out between guards. Commander Song fell into step beside him. "How do you feel about all this?" she asked. "Confused, Commander. I just wanted to save some people. Now they want to build a whole unit around the idea." Song smiled slightly. "Welcome to being human in the Coalition, Corporal. We don't fit their boxes, so they're building new boxes for us." They passed through a corridor with windows looking out into space. Taewon stopped and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Ravagers were still fighting, still calculating, still trying to destroy everything. And now there was a unit dedicated to fighting them the human way, with emotion, with irrationality, with the refusal to accept that any loss was acceptable. Taewon touched the window. His reflection stared back at him. He looked tired, older, but alive. "I hope we know what we're doing, Commander." Song laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. "We don't, that's the point. If we knew what we were doing, it would be predictable. And predictable gets you killed by machines." She put a hand on his shoulder. "Rest up, Corporal. Training starts in 2 weeks. You're going to teach aliens how to be irrational." Taewon watched her walk away. Then he looked back at the stars. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to figure out how to explain human emotion to species who thought in pure logic. It was going to be interesting. 6 months later, Taewon stood in a training facility on the edge of Coalition space. Training Facility Sigma 9 was cold, remote, and deliberately placed far from important worlds. If the experiment failed, nobody wanted it happening near civilization. The facility housed 200 human soldiers. All of them had been at Helion 7. All of them had chosen to turn back and fight. They were now officially called Tactical Innovation Group Epsilon. Unofficially, everyone called them the Crazy Unit. Taewon was still a corporal. He had refused promotion 3 times. Sergeant stripes would mean more responsibility, more decisions, more people depending on him. He just wanted to be a soldier, but Commander Song kept pushing him to take leadership roles anyway. Today he was teaching a class. The students were a mix of species. 15 Draxians led by Lieutenant Kravor, 5 young Velkari who had broken from their hive mind way of thinking, 2 Lumini observers, and 50 humans who thought they understood what this unit was about but really did not. Taewon stood at the front of the classroom. A holographic display showed Earth's military history, battles where humans fought impossible odds: Thermopylae, Alamo, Dunkirk, Iwo Jima. "What do all these battles have in common?" Taewon asked. One of the Velkari raised a clawed arm. "They were all losses or near losses. From a strategic perspective, these humans should have retreated." "Exactly," Taewon said. Logic said retreat. Every calculation said they would lose. But they stayed anyway. Kravor stood. "Because they valued honor over survival." "No," Taewon said. "I mean, yes, but it is more than honor. It is about what you refuse to accept." At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans refused to accept that Persia would pass. At the Alamo, defenders refused to accept that Texas would fall without a fight. They knew they would die. They stayed anyway. One of the human soldiers spoke up. "So we are learning how to die gloriously? That is what this unit is about?" Taewon shook his head. "We are learning when to ignore the numbers. The Ravagers are machines. They calculate everything. When they see a force of 300, they know they can win with 600, but they cannot calculate why someone would stay when they can run. That confusion is our weapon." He changed the holographic display. It showed the Battle of Helion 7. "When I charged at the Ravagers, I did not think about winning. I thought about buying time. The machines redirected to stop me because I was acting illogically. That created a gap. That gap won the battle." The Velkari student clicked her mandibles. "So you want us to act illogically on purpose? To make tactical errors to confuse the enemy?" "Not errors," Taewon said. "Choices. Deliberate choices to do what the enemy cannot predict." Training was brutal. They practiced defending worthless positions. They practiced fighting when retreat made sense. They practiced sacrificing strategic advantage for moral objectives. It went against everything the coalition military taught. Hye-Jin Choi, now promoted to sergeant, ran medical training. She taught alien medics something that shocked them. Human medics would risk their lives to save wounded soldiers even when leaving them made tactical sense. But why? asked a Velkari medical student. A dead medic cannot help future wounded. Sacrificing one medic to save one soldier is inefficient. Hee-jin looked at her, because the soldier lying there wounded is not a number. He is a person, and we do not leave people behind. Even when it is illogical, especially when it is illogical. 3 months into training, Commander Song received new orders. A minor pirate operation in the Korvath sector. Simple suppression mission. It would be the unit's first real deployment. Song gathered her officers. Captain Quan, now promoted to Major. Tae-won, still refusing to be anything but Corporal. Kravor, officially assigned as liaison but really just part of the team. Hai-jin, who had become the unit's moral center. Intelligence says it is a small pirate base, Song explained. 2 ships, maybe 50 fighters. We go in, neutralize them, come home. Easy first mission. Tae-won felt uneasy. It sounds too easy. Sometimes things are just easy, Corporal, Quan said. They were wrong. Intelligence was very wrong. When Tactical Innovation Group Epsilon dropped out of hyperspace in the Korvath sector, they found 30 Ravager warships preparing for a major offensive. Not pirates, Ravagers. Song stared at the tactical display. Her face went pale. This is not a pirate base. This is a forward staging area. Quan was already calculating. We cannot fight this. We need to retreat and call for reinforcements. Reinforcements will take 6 hours, Kravor said. Song pulled up a larger tactical map. 3 nearby colonies appeared, all within striking distance of the Ravager fleet. If they launch now, those colonies will be destroyed before reinforcements arrive. 3 million people. The command deck went silent. Tae-won looked at the numbers. His unit had 12 ships. The Ravagers had 30, plus orbital defenses, plus fighter squadrons. The math was simple. Stay and fight, they all die. Retreat, 3 million civilians die. He waited for Song to order the retreat. It was the smart choice. The logical choice. The choice any coalition commander would make. Song stood up. Her face was set, determined. We hold, Quan looked at her. Commander, we cannot win this. I know, Song said. We do not need to win. We need 6 hours. We can give them 6 hours. Tae-won felt something in his chest. It was not fear. It was recognition. This was it. This was the moment they trained for. The moment when logic said run and you stayed anyway. Song opened a channel to the entire unit. All ships, this is Commander Song. The Ravagers are preparing to attack 3 colonies. Reinforcements are 6 hours away. Standard doctrine says we retreat and preserve our forces, but we are not a standard unit, she paused. We trained for impossible situations. We trained to fight when fighting makes no sense. This is that moment. We will hold this position for 6 hours. Not because we can win, because 3 million people need 6 hours and we can give them 6 hours. Any ship that wants to retreat may do so now. No shame. No judgment, Tae-won watched the tactical display. No ships retreated. Every single vessel stayed in formation, Kravor roared. The Draxians on other ships roared back. The sound carried through the communications network. Song smiled. It was a sad smile. Then we fight. All ships engage defensive pattern, Helion. Make them pay for every meter. The battle began. It was brutal from the first second. The Ravagers had superior numbers, superior firepower, superior position. They should have crushed the human force in minutes. But Tactical Innovation Group Epsilon did not fight like a normal unit. They used every unconventional tactic they had learned. They faked retreats to lure enemies into ambushes. They defended worthless positions just to force the Ravagers to waste resources eliminating them. They sacrificed damaged ships in ramming attacks that destroyed much larger vessels. Tae-won led a boarding team onto a Ravager destroyer. It was suicide. Everyone knew it. They went anyway. Using close-quarters combat, they disabled the ship's main reactor. It exploded, taking out 2 other Ravager ships nearby. Hee-jin refused to abandon wounded soldiers even when their positions were being overrun. Other soldiers saw her determination and stayed to protect her. Those defensive points became accidental strongholds that the Ravagers could not break quickly. Hour by hour, the unit held. Ships died. Soldiers died. The Ravagers kept coming. But they were slowed. Confused. Their tactical AI could not predict what the humans would do next because the humans kept doing things that made no logical sense. 5 hours in, Song's command ship was crippled. Life support was failing. Half her crew was dead. Quan was wounded but still fighting. Taewon was back aboard, covered in burns and barely able to stand. Status? Song asked. 4 ships left, Quan reported. His voice was weak. 70% casualties. But the Ravagers have not launched toward the colonies. How long until reinforcements? 43 minutes. Song nodded. Then we hold for 43 more minutes. Taewon looked around the bridge. Everyone there knew they were not going to survive another 43 minutes. The math was clear. But nobody suggested retreat. They fought. Every second felt like an hour. Every minute felt like forever. Ships exploded. Communications died. Systems failed. And then, like a miracle, coalition reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace. Dozens of ships. Fresh forces. The cavalry had arrived. The Ravagers, caught between the battered human unit and the fresh coalition fleet, tried to retreat. They failed. The battle ended in complete coalition victory. Tactical Innovation Group Epsilon had held for 6 hours and 43 minutes. All 3 colonies were safe. Every single civilian survived, but the cost was terrible. Of the 12 ships that started the battle, only 2 were still functional. Of 200 soldiers, only 47 survived. 70% casualties. Taewon sat in the medical bay afterward. Heejin was next to him, both of them wrapped in bandages. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Heejin said, "We did it." "Yeah," Taewon said. "We did it." Was it worth it? Taewon thought about the 3 million people who were still alive. People who would never know how close they came to dying. People who were safe because 47 soldiers decided that 6 hours was worth their lives. "Yes," he said. "It was worth it." Across coalition space, military commanders were analyzing the Battle of Korvath sector. The numbers should have been impossible. A unit that small should not have held against a force that large. But they did. Fleet Commander Thelvan watched the battle recordings over and over. Her logical mind struggled to understand. Then slowly, she began to see it. The humans had not fought to win, they fought to delay, and in that delay they made victory possible. For the first time in 400 years, Thelvan reconsidered her assumptions about warfare. Perhaps there was something to this human approach. Perhaps emotion was not weakness. Perhaps it was a weapon they had never properly understood. She opened a communication channel to Coalition Command. "I am recommending that Tactical Innovation Group Epsilon be expanded. Their methods, while costly, achieve results standard tactics cannot. We should study their approach more carefully." Ambassador Jilin heard the recommendation and glowed with satisfaction. The humans were teaching the galaxy something important, something ancient species had forgotten. That sometimes refusing to accept defeat was more powerful than any weapon. 1 year after Helion 7, everything had changed. Tactical Innovation Group Epsilon had fought 12 major engagements. They won 11. Their casualty rate remained high, but their success rate was unprecedented in Coalition history. The Coalition War College now taught case studies about human tactics. Other species were forming their own experimental units. The Draxians integrated emotional decision-making into their honor codes. Even some Velkari were questioning pure logical warfare. Taewon was still a corporal. He still refused promotion. But everyone in the Coalition military knew his name. He had become a symbol. The soldier who stepped forward when ordered to retreat. The human who proved that emotion could be a weapon. He did not like being a symbol. He just wanted to be a soldier. Then the Ravagers changed their strategy. The machine intelligence had been analyzing Coalition tactical changes. They identified the source of unpredictability: humans. Remove humans, and Coalition tactics would return to predictable patterns. The Ravagers assembled the largest fleet in their history, 3,000 warships. Their target was not a military base or strategic position. Their target was Earth. Commander Song received the intelligence report in her office. She read it twice. Then she called an emergency meeting with Coalition Command. The meeting was held on the Coalition capital world. Representatives from every major species attended. Fleet Commander Thelvan stood at the center, her multiple eyes reflecting concern. The Ravagers are targeting Earth directly, Thelvan said. 3,000 ships. The largest offensive they have ever launched. This is not a normal attack. This is an extermination attempt. Song felt her blood run cold. 3,000 ships. Earth's defenses could maybe handle 300. Maybe. Thelvan activated a tactical display. I have calculated the optimal defensive strategy. To protect Earth, we would need to commit 40% of the Coalition fleet. This would leave critical sectors vulnerable. The Ravagers could launch secondary attacks while we defend Earth. The chamber was silent. Everyone understood what she was implying. Thelvan continued, her voice emotionless. My analysis shows that defending Earth will cost approximately 40% of our forces, and may still fail. The probability of Earth surviving is 32%. If we strategically withdraw, we preserve coalition strength and can launch counteroffensives that will ultimately defeat the Ravagers. Strategically withdraw, Song repeated slowly. You mean abandon Earth? Yes, Thelvan said. Earth has a population of 3.2 billion humans. Coalition worlds collectively house over 1 trillion beings. Sacrificing 3.2 billion to save 1 trillion is mathematically sound. Song stood up. Her hands were shaking with rage. You want to let Earth die? You want to sacrifice my entire species because the numbers say it makes sense? Ambassador Jilin floated forward. Commander Thelvan, I must protest. The humans have proven their value to the Coalition. They have taught us new ways of thinking, new ways of fighting. To abandon them now would be logical, Thelvan interrupted. I respect what humans have contributed, but logic must prevail. We cannot risk the entire Coalition to save one species. Song looked around the chamber. She saw doubt on alien faces. They were considering it. They were actually considering abandoning Earth to die. She thought about Taiwan, about Helion 7, about every battle where humans refused to accept that some losses were acceptable. I have a proposal, Song said. The chamber went quiet. Thelvan gestured for her to continue. Give me every human ship in the Coalition fleet. Give me Tactical Innovation Group Epsilon. Give me every human soldier you have. We will defend Earth ourselves. You do not need to risk Coalition forces. If we fail, humanity is destroyed, but the Coalition remains strong. If we succeed, it proves human tactics work on the largest scale. Murmurs filled the chamber. Thelvan's mandibles clicked. You are proposing that humans defend Earth alone? Against 3,000 Ravager ships? Yes. How many human ships can you assemble? Song checked her datapad. 847 combat vessels, plus whatever Earth can contribute from local defense forces. Thelvan calculated. 847 against 3,000. The probability of success is less than 1%. We are aware of the odds, Commander, Song said. But humans do not fight based on probability. We fight because some things are worth dying for. Earth is worth dying for. Jilin glowed brighter. The proposal has merit. It removes coalition risk while giving Earth a chance to defend itself. Other voices joined the discussion. Some species argued for helping defend Earth. Others agreed with Thelvan's logic. The debate lasted hours. Finally, the council voted. They accepted Song's proposal. Humanity would defend Earth alone. If they succeeded, it would prove human value. If they failed, the coalition would mourn but continue. Song left the meeting and immediately sent out the call. Every human soldier in coalition space, every human ship, return to Earth. Prepare for the largest battle humanity had ever faced. Taiwan received the order on a transport heading back to Earth. He was with his squad. He-Jin, Captain Quan, now a colonel, Lieutenant Kravor, who had insisted on joining despite not being human. 3,000 ships, He-Jin said quietly. We cannot win this, Kravor growled. Since when do humans worry about winning? You worry about fighting. Taiwan looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, 3,000 Ravager ships were heading toward Earth, toward home, toward everything. We do not need to win, he said. We just need to make them wish they never came. The human fleet assembled in orbit around Earth, 847 warships. It sounded like a lot until you compared it to 3,000. Every ship carried soldiers who knew they were probably going to die. They came anyway. From Earth, billions of people watched the fleet gather. They knew what was coming. They knew the odds. But they also knew that every human soldier up there had chosen to stand between Earth and extinction. Song stood on the bridge of her flagship. She had been promoted to admiral for this battle. It felt hollow. What good was a rank when you were about to die? She opened a fleet-wide channel. Every ship, every soldier could hear her. This is Admiral Song. In a few hours, the Ravagers will arrive. They come to destroy Earth. They come to eliminate humanity because they believe we are the source of coalition unpredictability. They are right, she paused. The Ravagers are machines. They calculate everything. They have calculated that 3,000 ships can defeat 847. Their math is correct. But they do not understand us. They do not understand that humans do not fight because we can win. We fight because some things are worth dying for. Earth is our home. It is where we came from, where our families live, where our children grow. The Ravagers think they can take it because they have more ships, but they cannot calculate love. They cannot calculate determination. They cannot calculate what it means to fight for home. Song felt tears on her face. We are going to lose this battle. Many of us will die.
Maybe all of us.
But we will make them pay for every meter. We will make them remember that humanity does not surrender, that we do not retreat, that when you attack our home, we step forward. Today we teach the galaxy what humanity means. Today we show them that some species would rather die fighting than live running. Today we make our stand. Across the fleet, soldiers cheered, not because they thought they would win, because they knew they were fighting for something that mattered more than survival. Tae-Won sat in his combat station. He thought about Min-Soo, his brother who died because someone chose to retreat. He thought about Helion 7, where he chose to step forward. He thought about every battle since then. This was what it all led to. One final stand. Humanity against the machines. Life against calculation. Emotion against logic. He checked his rifle. Full charge. He checked his armor. All systems green. He looked at Hyejin, who gave him a small, sad smile. He looked at Kravor, who nodded respect. Ready? Hyejin asked. Tae-Won nodded. Ready, the sensors detected them first. 3,000 contacts dropping out of hyperspace. The Ravager fleet had arrived. They moved into attack formation with mechanical precision. Perfect spacing. Perfect coordination. Perfect calculation. The human fleet moved to intercept. 847 ships against 3,000. The odds were impossible, but humans had never cared about odds. Song gave the order. All ships engage. For Earth, for humanity. Show them what we are. The battle for Earth began. It would be the longest 6 hours humanity had ever known. It would be the bloodiest battle in coalition history. It would be the moment when the galaxy learned what humans truly were. It would be the moment when Tae-Won Park, the soldier who stepped forward at Helion 7, would step forward one final time. Not because he could win, not because logic demanded it, but because he was human. And humans do not retreat when home needs defending. They step forward. The first hour was hell. The Ravager fleet came at them like a steel wave. Plasma fire lit up space like stars being born and dying. Human ships exploded. Ravager ships exploded. The battle was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. The humans fought unlike any force the Ravagers had faced. They did not try to win ship-to-ship battles. They tried to make every second cost the Ravagers more than it should. Damaged human ships rammed into Ravager capital vessels. The machines calculated that damaged ships would retreat. They never expected kamikaze attacks. Each collision destroyed multiple Ravager ships. Small human fighters flew impossible patterns, drawing fire away from larger ships. They sacrificed themselves to create openings. The Ravagers could not predict it because it made no logical sense. Tae-Won led a boarding team onto a Ravager destroyer. It was the 5th ship they had boarded. Every time he expected to die. Every time, somehow, they succeeded. Human close-quarters combat was something the Ravagers never prepared for. They were designed for ship warfare, not soldiers with knives fighting in corridors. He planted charges on the reactor core. His team ran. The ship exploded behind them as they jumped back to their transport. Kravor pulled him aboard. They both collapsed, breathing hard. How many is that? Kravor asked. 5, Tae-Won said. Only 2,995 to go. Kravor laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. You humans have a strange sense of humor. 3 hours into the battle, the human fleet was down to 400 ships. They had destroyed over 800 Ravager vessels. The math still favored the machines, but not by as much. And every minute they held, Earth was safe. Admiral Song watched the tactical display. Her flagship was heavily damaged. Half her bridge crew was dead or wounded. Colonel Quan was running damage control personally. But they were still fighting. "Admiral, the Ravager command ship is pulling back," her sensor officer reported. "They are recalculating." Song leaned forward. "Recalculating what?" "Unknown. But they are losing ships faster than their projections predicted. They expected to have eliminated us by now with minimal losses." Song understood. The Ravagers were machines. They made decisions based on cost-benefit analysis. They came expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found humans willing to trade one ship for 3. Humans willing to die to take enemies with them. The math was changing. "Keep the pressure on," Song ordered. "Do not let them think. Do not let them regroup. Hit them with everything." The human fleet surged forward. It was suicidal. Everyone knew it. They did it anyway. 4 hours in, something changed. The Ravager fleet began a tactical withdrawal. Not a full retreat, but repositioning. They were trying to minimize losses while maintaining offensive capability. Song realized what it meant. The Ravagers had recalculated. Conquering Earth would cost more than they could afford. They were going to escape, analyze human tactics, and return with better strategies. She could not let that happen. If the Ravagers escaped with their data, they would come back stronger. This was the only chance to end the threat. "Find me the command ship," Song said. Her sensor officer highlighted it on the display. The Ravager command vessel was at the center of their formation, protected by 50 warships. Its hyperspace drive was charging. Song did the math. 200 human ships left. They needed to punch through 50 Ravager vessels to reach the command ship before it jumped to hyperspace. It was impossible. But impossible had never stopped humans before. "All remaining ships, this is Admiral Song. Form up for spear formation. Target is the Ravager command vessel. We are going to ram straight through their defensive line and destroy it before it escapes." Silence on the comm for 3 seconds. Then voices responded. Every remaining captain agreed. They knew it was suicide. They formed up anyway. Taewan was back on his frigate. The ship was barely holding together. Life support was flickering. Weapons were at 30%. But the engines still worked. That was all they needed. Yejin sat next to him. She had stopped trying to save everyone. There were too many wounded and not enough time. She just sat with Taiwan holding her rifle. "I am scared," she said quietly. Taewan took her hand. "Me too." "Do you think we will win?" "No," Taiwan said honestly, "but we will make them remember us." Kravor stood nearby. The Draxian had fought alongside humans for over a year now. He considered them brothers. "If I die today, I die as a warrior among warriors. My clan will sing of this battle forever." Song gave the order. "All ships engage engines, maximum speed, straight line to the command vessel. Do not stop for anything." The human fleet accelerated. 200 ships in tight formation, flying directly at the most heavily defended point in the Ravager fleet. It was insanity. The Ravagers opened fire. Plasma bolts filled space. Human ships exploded. But the formation kept moving. Ships that were destroyed were pushed aside by the ships behind. Nothing stopped. Taewan felt his ship shudder as weapons fire hit the hull. Alarms screamed, systems failed, but the engines kept running. They kept flying toward the command ship. Then something impossible happened. Ships appeared from hyperspace. Not Ravager ships, coalition ships, hundreds of them, Draxian cruisers, Velkari carriers, Lumini energy vessels, ships from every coalition species. At the head of the coalition fleet was Fleet Commander Thelvan's flagship. Her voice came through on all channels. "Human forces, this is Fleet Commander Thelvan. Apologies for our delay. We decided that mathematics does not calculate the value of refusing to surrender. You taught us that. Now let us teach the Ravagers together." Song felt tears streaming down her face. They came, against orders, against logic. The coalition came to fight for Earth. The coalition fleet crashed into the Ravager forces. Thousands of ships joined the battle. The Ravagers were suddenly surrounded. Their perfect calculations meant nothing in the face of an entire galaxy fighting with human determination. The human fleet continued its charge toward the command vessel. They were close now. So close. The command ship tried to jump to hyperspace, but coalition forces had disabled its engines. Taewan's frigate was dying. Hull breaches on every deck. Most of his crew was dead. But the ship was still flying, still moving forward. Hyejin, Kravor, get to the escape pods, Taewan said. No, Hyejin said. We stay together. Kravor roared agreement. Brothers do not abandon brothers. Taewan smiled. He was terrified. He was probably going to die. But he was not alone. He looked at the command ship on his display. It was right there, so close he could almost touch it. He thought about Helion 7, about stepping forward when everyone else retreated, about choosing to fight when fighting made no sense. He thought about his brother, about every person he had saved, about every battle he had fought. This was the end, he knew it. But it was a good end. His frigate, along with a dozen other human ships, slammed into the Ravager command vessel. The explosion was visible from Earth. The command ship died. The Ravager fleet, without coordination, became vulnerable. The coalition forces systematically destroyed every remaining Ravager ship. The battle was won. Earth was saved. In the wreckage of his frigate, Taewan woke up. He was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. The ship had been torn apart by the collision, but his section survived. Hyejin was next to him, unconscious but breathing. Kravor was pulling them both toward an emergency hatch. Stay awake, human, Kravor growled. You do not get to die today. Rescue ships found them floating in the debris. They were pulled aboard, treated, saved. Out of 200 ships in the final charge, 17 survived. Out of thousands of soldiers, hundreds lived, but Earth was saved. Every single person on Earth survived. 3.2 billion lives. 1 year later, Taewan stood at the Coalition War Memorial on Earth. It was a massive structure, listing every soldier who died defending the planet. 200,000 names. 200,000 people who chose to stand when retreat made sense. Admiral Song stood beside him. Colonel Kwan, Sergeant Hyejin Choi, Lieutenant Kravor. The survivors of Tactical Innovation Group Epsilon Ambassador Shilin floated near. She had written the memorial inscription. It read in every coalition language, they were told to retreat. They stepped forward instead. They taught the galaxy that survival is not victory. Fighting for what matters is victory. Fleet Commander Thelvan approached. The Velkari commander looked at Taewan for a long moment. Then she spoke. I spent 400 years calculating how to preserve life by avoiding death. You taught me that sometimes the willingness to die is what preserves life. I do not fully understand it, but I have learned to trust it. Taewan smiled slightly. Commander, I am not sure we understand it either. We just do it. Thelvan's mandibles clicked in what might have been respect. She walked away. The ceremony continued. Speeches about sacrifice, about courage, about how humanity changed the galaxy. When it ended, Hyejin approached Taewan. She had been offered a teaching position at the Coalition Medical Academy. She was leaving in a week. Will you be okay? She asked. Taewan looked up at the stars. New joint human-alien task forces were being formed. The Coalition was rewriting military doctrine to include human tactics. Across the galaxy, soldiers were learning that sometimes emotion was stronger than logic. We changed something, he said quietly, not because we are stronger or smarter, because we refused to accept what everyone thought was inevitable. That is all we did. Refused to retreat when retreat made sense. Hyejin nodded. So what do we do now? Taewan grinned. It was the first real smile she had seen from him in months. We keep stepping forward. He looked at the memorial one last time. 200,000 names. 200,000 people who taught the galaxy what humanity meant, what courage meant, what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. The commander had ordered retreat. Taewan stepped forward instead. And in that moment he changed everything, not because he was special, not because he was a hero, but because he was human. And humans do not retreat when there are people to save. They step forward. Always forward. Even when logic says run. Even when the odds are impossible, even when everyone else retreats, humans step forward. That is what they do. That is what they will always do. The end.